All right. Well, usually we kick off around 2 minutes after, so I'll get started and we'll just let some of the latecomers in. But hey, welcome everyone to this week's AMA. This week we're excited. The L1 Education Series is basically back this week. We've got a special cryptography check-in and update AMA with LAMINA1's in-house cryptographer Mario Yaksetig. Um, so for anyone who missed it, earlier this week we published an article that Mario published on Substack this week. And basically it's like this new idea that he was super eager to share and discuss with like the Lamina1 and Web3 communities at large. It's kind of like the beginning of a really interesting new idea on how to make sort of like hexadecimal transactions on the Lamina1 blockchain more human. um, and yeah, we kind of just brought him on to talk about the paper and also just to kind of fill us all in on what he's been working on behind the scenes at Lamina One. Obviously, we're still in the middle of kind of launching the mainnet chain, and we've been doing all sorts of things around questing and around kind of like hyping up and growth. But, this week we wanted to take everyone back to like kind of like the hardcore basics and like what's actually happening behind the scenes of the chain and a lot of the things that Mario is thinking about. And it's super interesting too, because he and I kind of caught up earlier this week, and a lot of the stuff that Mario thinks about and works about, ends up becoming, features and like new ways of how we do things on Lamina One down the line. He's kind of like, the first in the chain of decisions and things like, he's starting charting out new territories and then we build it. So it's really fascinating. Love having Mario on. I'm sure you guys will enjoy him. And welcome. So yeah, definitely if you haven't yet already, pull up that article, check it out. It's pretty short. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about before we kind of expand out to some of the other things that Mario's been working on. So welcome, Mario. How you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm super happy. It's Friday. I'm excited. I'm having a good day. I'm super hyped for this AMA. It was actually great that we caught up earlier this week because it kind of like my brain subconsciously mulled over what we discussed, and I have like something even more stuff to share today than when we first checked in this week.
Exciting, exciting. Yeah. And in terms of housekeeping before we start, as always, anyone looking for like secret code for questing or whatever, that'll happen at the end of this session. And I'm also going to, at the end here, I will give some quick updates about the redemption drop, the quest bot, and a few other things that you all have been asking about. We're definitely like keeping an eye on stuff. Feel free to drop questions in the chat live, but just as kind of a reminder, I think Kat, our moderator, has been saying this, but this AMA is going to be focused on cryptography and stuff. If anyone wants to ask kind of like when listing, when token unlocks, any of those questions, unfortunately, I don't even know the answers to those questions yet. Haven't gotten a green light from the team, so unfortunately, we still can't answer those. But
Let
um,
alone me, right? So
yeah, let
keep that in
alone
mind.
yeah, but we can talk cryptography today. So definitely feel
Exactly.
free to drop those cues in the chat live. So yeah, I think to kind of start off, I mean, obviously I just dropped the link to the article, but for those who are just kind of like reading through it or may have just skimmed the article, why don't you just give us a brief overview, Mario, of the recent kind of posts that you published and the kind of potential innovations and stuff that it suggests?
Absolutely, yeah. So, and also kind of like to set the tone for the AMA, this was kind of like a subset of this work that I'm doing internally. So I'm writing this paper called I like to have puns in the titles of the paper. So this one is going to be called Highly Likely Long Island Ice Keys, all right, as in cryptographic keys. So just making like a fun pun there. Usually the crypt reviewers in the cryptography community may not really like it. One time I had a professor that didn't want to be part of an article with such a title. That was fun. And then as part of that, we're basically studying kind of like the feasibility and the actual attacks in the wild, as many of you spotted on Discord, against vanity addresses, kind of like brute forcing, trying to like use these type of brute force to trick people. And one of the things, like now working a lot in governance as well on the L1 side, one of the things that is always tricky for me ends up being this notion of having to go to like the Etherscan type of like explorer. And then you're just like on this back and forth, like memorizing numbers from your wallet and trying to go step by step. I usually just like copy the wallet address or the transaction hash, post it in like the URL and just kind of like compare it one by one. But that is like really frustrating. And I like to see myself as someone who is fairly knowledgeable in the space. And I think, okay, if this is super frustrating for me, how would it be for like my parents, right? My parents probably don't even have, as far as I know, a crypto wallet. So can we do better? And working in voting, it turns out that I just kind of had a little like brain dump there in that post. Like maybe this could be interesting to use, kind of like this mapping and encode some voting actions. That's not to say that this invalidates the whole process of checking. I know this kind of was a big concern that appeared internally on Discord. They're not mutually exclusive. This is just to make that checking process a bit easier and to almost have kind of like this positive reinforcement when you kind of like you voted for yes, and then you see a transaction hash that says good, and then you check something else on that hash. It should be a much cleaner process than you just going down this rabbit hole that I was saying, where you're going like character by character, and you can
So
then
you
kind of like
sort of
play
backup for
around with
folks who
this.
haven't to back up for folks who haven't maybe read the article, it's about kind of like encoding like within the hexadecimal address itself, like stuff like actual kind of like words
Exactly. Yeah, I'll take
readable
it a step back.
language, right?
Exactly. I'll take it
Yeah.
a step back. Exactly. So if you think cryptography, cryptography works with very big numbers, and computers talk in bits. And usually, when you think cryptography, you're at least looking at 256 bits for like primes and like secret keys, etc. And it's very hard for a person to memorize 256 bits. Like, I don't think I could ever do it. And so there has to be kind of like this way of uh, computers talk in bits, and that's kind of like I think that's the start of the article. Is computers talk in bits, humans communicate in letters, and then we actually have hexadecimals. Can we find kind of like a better middle ground? And that's what this actually is, right? Can you find like better middle ground that would exist today? And this was just like a short paper, short idea. I just wanted to put it out there. I want to start putting more content out there for all of you guys to see what's going on. And this was just like the beginning of hopefully many articles that are to come now. And so
Amazing.
that's the context, right? So that's the context, everyone. And then kind of like in the article, I just go over the interesting kind of like easy to read mappings that you can achieve in this setting. And also ends up being kind of like a call to action. If you guys think like, oh, it could be nice to maybe use it in this specific setting, feel free to drop me a DM or actually talk and like post in one of the channels on Discord. I try to be very responsive, as many of you probably know, and no worries. Like don't feel like I'm too far away. I'm one
Yeah,
message
totally.
away only.
So you kind of mentioned that you were kind of like working on voting and governance stuff when you were thinking about this solution. So we got like a couple of questions around just kind of like, all right, so like making like blockchain more readable, like so this is super useful in terms of like voting and bidding, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about like what you were working on when you had this idea?
Yeah. So, and also for further context, guys, I'm a pure cryptographer. Like that was literally my background. Like my first job was I'm an applied cryptographer, but I love the theoretical side of something actually like feasible that I like to bring to the masses. And I was working with Chaum. There's another guy called Bart Pernille. He was actually the creator of one of the hash functions used in Bitcoin. And a couple of years ago, we started working on this voting project, and there's a lot of problems in like the online voting realm. And one has always been kind of like checking that your vote was cast correctly, and that checking is very tricky, right? It's like kind of like touching on what I was saying in the beginning. So here, it's just the intuition here is to just trying to make that checking process a bit easier. And you kind of end up getting a two for one deal because this is not something to be used at scale, right? So you're not really going to have people do like a proof of work every time they want to send, like pay for a coffee, for example. And But maybe if it's like a special vote in the governance and you want it, like the wallet wants to make it easier for you to check in that specific setting, you could have this light proof of work. So that was the context of it, kind of like making it just easier once we kind of like bring more innovation for the public on the governance side of things. This is just a glimpse of what's going on. Like if you want to check that your vote was cast correctly, and this would just help you a bit with that.
Yeah, the team has been super heads down on trying to figure out, the next step of the equation for the staking and voting. Obviously, a bunch of our top testers know that we're getting ready to start rolling out staking. We've done a couple of play tests so far, but anyone who's read the governance white paper knows that we've definitely got some holes in there with regards to voting, how it's going to work on the network, how it's going to show up. And so Mario has been working a lot, kind of like working on the kind of back end side while we all test the front end and how that's going to work. So this is kind of like your initial sneak peek into some new ideas that we have uh, around voting and how that's going to potentially look on the chain moving forward. I definitely want to dive into some questions now. I think we've kind of talked about obviously the benefit of making, human readable hexadecimals on a blockchain, making it easier to check, if your vote went through or if your bid went through, and the potential use cases. But we definitely got a number of questions from community members. And again, if you guys have any cues, feel free to drop them in the chat. I mean, I think one of the first questions we got was from Ed Keys, who asked, couldn't a malicious voting app also generate a transaction hash that says good, even if the actual vote in the transaction says bad? How is this? How do we secure something like
So this is
this?
true. This is
Yeah.
true, and I love Ed for asking questions like this because as everything in cryptography, the devil is in the details, right? This is not just something you can kind of plug and play and think it's secure out of the box. The way I actually envisioned like voting concretely, like in the example so the answer is yes, like this could actually happen. But the way I see it is you would actually have kind of like two addresses. One would be good, the other one would be bad. And then the vote itself would also be like good and some string. So then when you go on the block explorer, you're going to check two things. You're going to check that your transaction hash actually says good. So, and then that is then sent to a counterparty that is kind of like the elected server for the yes votes. So then maybe if you have an attack like this, that vote would not be tallied because you're sending a no vote, technically because it's like a hidden no vote. But then it would go to the good server, and the good server would be like, sorry, I don't really speak this language. So that kind of renders an attack like this uh, not effective. So this would be a good example on how kind of like using this primitive that I described in the article, you could actually leverage that to make this specific checking and like this specific attack more useless. Like it would be better for you.
Hmm. Um, Jackal Girl asked, kind of, speaking of attacks and things like that, asked, would this kind of approach be vulnerable to the same kinds of attacks that we've seen against, vanity adjust generators in the space? She wrote, I'm assuming that in order to make this work, whatever function that is generating the hash would have to keep at work until it generates the right kind of hash. Is this something that you'd want to do with, every transaction on the chain?
And Jackal Girl, I'll do you a 2-for-1 deal because I'm going to piggyback on this question and the one you dropped on Discord, and I'm going to answer both. So basically, the attacks against the vanity address generators ended up being like poor development practices. Like the way they were generating it ended up being somewhat of a rookie mistake. So we would never do it like that. But the intuition is correct. Like whatever you have, you would have to do some type of brute forcing where the kind of like the function is like whatever function is happening would have to be repeating over and over again. The beauty of this is also that you can have a parameter for this. So depending on how many letters you want, this is very flexible. So if you just want like 3 letters, this would run very quickly, literally sub-second, sub 2 seconds. You would barely feel it. And we would also not want to do this for every single transaction, right? This would be for like very specific use cases, very specific dApps, very specific actions. And I share your concern, like just to give you even more context, when we look at incorporating something like this at scale for like imagine a US election, it would be borderline negligible, the type of computation, because it's the type of stuff your phone does very quickly. And it's just kind of like a one-shot type of thing. And so this is not something that you would use for every single L1 transaction. It would be for something more concrete, more specific. One thing that actually came up during the conversations this week is that this could kind of be used also for likes, dislikes. And let me know if I'm getting ahead of things here, Ivy. And because since you can kind of encode this notion of good and bad, you could easily also make it like to reflect an action performed on a decentralized social media, for example.
Yeah, this
That
is actually, I really want to talk about this and dive into this. I don't think it's too early to dive into this, but this is like Mario's definitely highlighting something that we've been working on behind the scenes too, which is just like, all right, we're all like uploading content, we're about to launch spaces, like we want to allow people to like start like engaging with that content, right? Like liking that content, following certain spaces, upvoting certain things. And so yeah, Mario and I talked earlier this week, like, oh, this could be really interesting, like to encode some of that engagement into the chain itself. I would love if you wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that, Mario, because that's super exciting to me.
for sure, yeah. And if you think about this, like the decentralized social networking is very hard because traditionally a lot of the actions that happen always depend on like a single server. So it's very hard for Instagram to prove to someone that you like an action other than they're telling you, I told you, I'm telling you so. Uh, and if you just do like a vanilla decentralized social media network or social network, encoding all of that like just regular vanilla, maybe you sign something and that gets posted somewhere, that is a whole mess. Like if you're trying to diffuse what actually happened there, you're gonna have trouble. You're gonna need to have like very tricky scripts to tell you what happened. Versus if you have what we're doing, where you have the LAMINA1 naming service, right? Where you can kind of see people's usernames and then you see the interaction. Like this specific post is good, this specific post is bad. You can very quickly uh, denote like this like action, and anyone actually looking at a block explorer could be like, oh yeah, I'm Mario. This is my profile. Here's exactly everything that happened. Uh, that's obviously like in a transparent setting, some stuff that may make sense in the spaces. So don't be worried in the sense that this is like a big brother surveillance type of thing, because I'm a big privacy maxi. We're just exploring kind of like what are the possibilities in this specific setting. And it turns out that stuff is actually very interesting, and just this simple primitive complemented with these like decentralized social network type of thing, anyone here in this chat would already be able to kind of have a much better experience figuring out what's actually happening on that back end and that block explorer. So that was something, it's something I find pretty exciting. And honestly, if you have like nice use cases for this or specific words that you like to encode, this at the time, I remember growing up, there was this wheat writing, which is kind of like you use the numbers to like if you write Mario, you can actually do like M4 R10, kind of like the Mario, but in with more than half of the letters are actually numbers. So it ends up being, if you have any ideas or stuff that you would like to see in the spaces where we could leverage this, it would be pretty sick. And especially that type of stuff in spaces where it's very low exposure financially speaking, right? So something very lead speak, exactly. Where it's something very easy, very low effort, kind of like a like dislike, and you would be adding a lot of complexity to the block explorer, right? And you would need, because I'm reading a question now, Ivy, sorry.
Yeah,
Like, why not
Erasmus
just make a
asked,
better block
why not
explorer?
just make a better block explorer? Yeah, either scan
And that's the
replace.
goal here as well,
Yeah.
right? So that's also the goal here. But this is also just like if someone wanted to build an additional external block explorer, this would also just make it much easier. Um,
I love
it
Jack
doesn't have to be
Agrol's
one or
response.
the
Why
other.
not? Why not both?
Exactly, right? Why
For
not both?
sure.
Literally.
Yeah.
No, that's also something, also just to kind of like give you peace of mind, Erasmus, there. This is also something that is always on the back of our mind, right? So we introduce this primitive, but by no way we are going to make it such that this is the only thing that you have as a user. This is literally just to help people out. As you probably know, everything that we do internally is as user oriented as possible. So even when you see this type of stuff on a block explorer, it would be much cleaner and much easier to digest. But if you actually wanted to go under the hood and see that yourself, kind of like, oh, can I actually download a full node and expose this myself locally? You would actually have much more better readability.
Hmm. Hmm. We actually got a number of questions. Erasmus, glad you're here because we were just getting to some of your earlier questions from the Discord earlier this week, which Erasmus asked earlier, like, how does a solution like this like counteract spam? Like, would the difficulty increase depending on like the rate of transactions? Like, would it depend on the similarity of those transactions? And like, would this possibly result in like a poor UX for regular users? Like, you obviously shot those out. They're all kind of related, but I'd love to dive into like your kind of questions earlier this week a little deeper live here now.
Yeah. So for further context, I've worked with Bernie, who I hope you've had the pleasure of engaging with because he's one of the smartest people I've ever known. And funny enough, over the years, and I've worked with him, I've known him since college. So like we went to school together, to like uni together. But over the years, one of the things that always ended up being very useful for a lot of problems is to actually just have a light proof of work on the client side. And you can think of maybe you can have like a very low fee transaction with just a light proof of work, right? And that on its own already helps you mitigate spam, especially if you bind it to like the previous block. So you guys can actually go, listen, this is block 5 now. 10% of the transactions on this like specific block will be only at 1 cent if and only if you can have a light proof of work that depends on the previous block. And then whatever you try to submit after is no longer valid because you lost your time window. And I wouldn't say that results in poor usability because your wallet maybe stays there thinking for like 3 seconds, if that. You submit your transaction now is way cheaper. You didn't really feel anything, and you're helping counteract spam a lot. Versus if you don't have any type of proof of work at all, bots are going to come at you aggressively. So this is kind of like uh, a mix of different worlds, and we're trying to see kind of like what can be done. And just for further contrast, there was this paper at Financial Crypto this year where basically these guys created a way to condense like 1 or 2 bits in every single transaction. So you would actually do some type of brute forcing or something, and then whatever you post on chain is actually a bit smaller, and it would seem pretty negligible for the user. It's like literally that brute forcing is you don't even feel it at all. But it turns out if you had done that from the start, you would have saved like a stupid amount of storage on chain, and the security of the primitives remain pretty much the same. So this ends up being along that line of thought, kind of like we have this primitive, you can do this little light proof of work. It turns out that by doing this proof of work, you're already mitigating a lot of spam by default, and you can also encode interesting actions in hexadecimal. So that's the rationale there. It would counteract spam like that. If you were to enforce like a specific size of proof of work, then yes, it could affect usability. It would depend a lot on the case to case type of situation. So if you want to have a system where anyone can vote, but you want them to do like a 6 character brute forcing, maybe that's reasonable, right? Like people actually have to do some work instead of just flooding that contract with votes left and right, especially in like a low fee ecosystem or not, right? So it would depend on a case to case basis. This is something that we would not want to have all the time at all times, just aggressively being used. But it goes up exponentially really quickly. Yeah, it's literally the definition. Yeah, it doubles with every bit. So here, there's a lot of possibilities with plug and play, and even we were exploring some things with post-quantum crypto, and even that kind of ends up helping a lot. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with this light proof of work. This blog post just reflects one of many.
Hmm. Erasmus has a follow-up question. For the free usernames, you guys use 16 bits, and that was pretty quick, but it goes up exponentially, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's literally it. Um, uh, in the paper that we're writing, the Long Island ice keys, I don't remember exactly the numbers, but it's just calculating the feasibility of brute forcing 3 to 4 letters, both in the beginning and the end of a wallet, to trying to fool someone to send money to them, kind of like a what could potentially be called an address poisoning attack, if you want to call it that. And you then that's a primitive, and you just kind of like plug and play that with whatever you want. Here, if you think about it from that perspective, usually what people would do, you would try to do that type of brute forcing for someone who is more of a whale in an ecosystem, right? So, and that actually ended up happening to a CZ from Binance, right? So people actually went through a lot of convoluted work to try to scam CZ into sending them millions of dollars, but the attack wasn't really done to a lot of people like in the wild because it kind of required some work. One of the interesting things we're also exploring in that paper, and I don't have the results for that yet, is that when I have a clear formula of a money to check ratio. So how much money are you sending versus how many letters you should check? Kind of like if you send $100, and you can kind of put it in contracts with what the attacker would spend, right? So if you send $100, then you could just check like maybe 8 digits or 8 letters. But if you're sending over 10 grand, then you would have to check how many more you would have to check to have something kind of like very easy for people to just know, like, oh, no matter what ecosystem I'm at, if I'm sending a specific dollar amount, this converts specifically to a certain number of letters. That's something I
Mm-hmm.
would find very useful, right? And it's very aligned with what I was saying earlier. This would be something easier for my parents, right? So then you're like, oh, okay, you can, if you think of it like a 1-to-1 ratio as an example, is you're sending $1, you check one letter. That's not how it works, but it would be just something easier to kind of like memorize, and you can just put it into place.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I guess we kind of talked about like how this could approach or ladder up to things like voting or engagement, like likes, follows, that kind of stuff on the network. But I think like obviously this is like very much in like ideas phase, and I know you just wanted to get it out in front of the community and just kind of like see what they thought of it and like what potential use cases they thought of it. But like as like our cryptographer, like what's next for sort of like testing and proving out this potential verifiability improvement on the network? Like what are your next steps for like experimenting with how we might actually implement this and put this on and like, get people to start looking into it and playing around with it?
Yeah, this is tricky. It's always very tricky to kind of see how we're going from an actual idea and a cryptographic concept to the hands of the public. What we're looking at now is mostly in the context of this paper that I was telling you about, the Long Island ice keys. So a part of it is actually bringing to the community very concrete metrics on these types of attacks. Keep an eye out for this, how you can easily be protected against this. And then as part of this, we also want to make it easier for people to do these checks because the checks are boring. Like we've all been there. It's a pain to actually have to go through all of those letters and numbers whenever we make a transaction. So the thing that is next is probably me releasing the paper and sharing more concrete info with the community. I would love one of the next steps to be talking with people about kind of like interesting cases that they may see or interesting words that may come out of the encoding. Uh, Maybe even just a secure vanity address generator where we can kind of like encode fun words for the L1 ecosystem. The possibilities end up being, I wouldn't say limitless, but they're interesting. I think that's what's next, but very open. I would just drop an Easter egg, even though Easter has been like a while ago. You may see this in some of the governance stuff we're doing. And I know we'll be talking about that in subsequent weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I think as a spoiler alert, get ready for our pivot back to governance and staking stuff next week. It's sounding like our public playtest is finally gonna kick off then. Um, I also think like obviously while we have you here, Mario, you're working on more than just like this little idea. So I know you wanted to come on and provide a couple of updates on other stuff you've been working on recently in the cryptography arena. I guess like to kind of start off just with our bullet point list of things that we wanted to chat about, you've been doing some work on private authentication for the network too, correct?
Yes, and this is a great. This is probably one of the projects I'm most excited about, like now short term, because it's something pretty easy to digest, but I think it's super high impact. And I'll describe a flow that everyone in this audience can relate to. You go on a new app, you create a username and password, you register an account on that app. The way that works is you literally send your password to that counterparty. That gets encrypted via like TLS, like the actual secure communication between you and the website. And then that counterparty just hashes your password and stores it in a database. But you don't really have a clue if they're logging that password, or I even find it a bit like crazy that the whole process is widely accepted to be like this. And especially now as zero knowledge primitives kind of like develop, is like, can we do better? And it turns out that's one of the things we're exploring now. And it turns out you can actually do much better. And by doing much better, you end up gaining other benefits. When you log on to a website, so Instagram, Google, whatever, there's not a clear transcript that proves that you were able to log in, other than Google saying, yes, this person logged in, right? So that's kind of like how OAuth works today, is you go to a website, they go like, oh, you can sign in with Google, and then they just ask you to actually log in with Google, and then Google tells them like, listen, this looks good to me. This person here actually was able to authenticate themselves. Here's a little credential from me. And that works pretty well. That kind of like uh, is usually has the time to live. And it works pretty well. But it's kind of like I feel like we can do better, like just relying on Google for this authentication. So we actually took very literally and personally this notion of decentralized social networking. And what we wanted to do is, can you actually, using a vanilla blockchain, have secure password storage and secure authentication that is provable to everyone in the network? So can you actually prove a transcript of login? So this is crazy. If you think about it, you literally, the registration process alone doesn't leak your password. You don't really need any off-chain entities. You go straight to a node. You can do your registration there, straight to whatever RPC that you want. That registers your hash of the password and your username. That goes on chain vanilla. You don't expose your password to anyone. And then when you want to log in, you actually provide a proof that says that you know, and then that's very flexible. You can either provide a proof exactly. You can be like, boom, I'm Mario, I'm logging in right now. Or you can say, I'm one of these guys, I'm logging in right now. And then whatever action then can be performed by an off-chain entity as you wish. And this is how I think the future of authentication should be, because I've actually, like craziest thing, like some months ago, I wanted to buy these like casino chips, like branded casino chips. And then I clicked forget password, and I got an email saying your password is, and it was literally my password in plain text. And I
Oh
was like, what?
no.
I was like, what? I was like, what is this crime? And then I actually emailed them. I was like, oh, I believe you have a very like hardcore breach of consumer trust. Exactly, panic. And they were like, oh, here's $200 free credit. And I was like, no, just fix your database. I don't want that. Thank you
Oh
for
my
the
God.
credit. And
You were
that
buying
was actually
you were buying like potato chips online? Like that's where it
no,
came
no,
from?
poker,
No.
poker, like
Oh,
little
poker
poker,
chips.
branded
Okay.
poker.
I
Yeah.
was like,
And it
what?
was, it was so insane that I was like, wow, okay, this is not how it should go down. And
Wow.
so this idea of the private authentication is something I've had in my mind for a while. I've had great discussions with Will about this. Will is super excited about this. Yeah, Jackal, that was my reaction too. I was like, what? And it's something that's been on my mind for a while, and it's great to actually see this, seeing daylight now. There's a couple of interesting, usually engineering and cryptography ends up being always a trade-off discussion. So there's some interesting trade-offs, stuff that may work very well, maybe on your laptop, maybe not necessarily as fast on your phone. So it's all about finding like the right trade-offs, kind of like the right use cases that make sense, and so on. But that I find is super interesting because you can finally have this notion of transcripts that would be required in an actual like decentralized social network, and you would only need just your wallet, right? Or your wallet would be more than enough actually. So you would only need something pretty clean to log in. Uh, and as much as we actually want to also kind of have like this backwards compatibility where you just have a username password, but you can do it securely and with privacy.
Yeah, it's always an interesting balance trying to strike like super secure versus like easy to use. Yeah, it's obviously what we've been working on super hard. Also wanted to ask about an update. So last time you were on Mario, we kind of talked about this like idea of like eCash and a private L1 token. You published a paper on that, and I feel like this is kind of related to some of the private authentication stuff. So what's your status report? Do you have any updates on that and how that kind of work and development is going?
So the development for that actually, like we were exploring a couple of things. Uh, I can actually try to give you another Easter egg. So I was trying to have this be as reliable and serverless as possible to kind of have some very high performant infra. But where this is now is we're looking at potentially integrating this then with like spaces and actions. And this would go along very well also with something I'll cover pretty soon in this Q&A with the Vault wallet. So this ends up being a great part and a great addition to what we're trying to do for tools on the user side. So first, and if you look at kind of like all the stuff I'm talking about here is mostly stuff for the users, right? So first, how can we make it easier for you to actually encode like actions using hexadecimal? Boom, that's for users, period. The private authentication, how can we have it such that even if the database gets leaked, and in this case, we're actually leaking it on purpose. It's going on chain just so that we show that we have no control over anyone's like private data. That's for users too. I would be very excited to have that. And then the private L1 token, we would basically also kind of like take advantage of the existing infra. We would add an additional off-chain component and potentially something that could be interesting if anyone in the community is interested. We could distribute that signing process of, so if you look at the paper, Ivy just posted it, on the trust minimized eCash for cryptocurrencies. You're basically kind of like bringing some old school primitives from Schaum. I used to work with Schaum many years ago. And I kind of improved on his protocol to make it a bit more transparent. Don't tell him I said this because I don't know if he would if he would really like to hear that. But I got along with him pretty well, and I'm super excited to bring that on chain too. And I've had even interesting discussions with Ed Keys, kind of like on how things could compare on how things compare with the AutoCAD, how can like you leverage each other's design.
Hmm. Hero protagonist asks, what happens when it gets compromised? Can't change your DNA yet.
Yeah, that was for the DNA passwords, right? It's
Yeah,
heavy stuff.
for sure.
We have Erasmus. We have looked at account abstractions. Yeah, there's a whole line of development internally on account abstraction.
Hmm.
It's harder than it sounds, but there is, and maybe that's even something interesting to have Bernie talk about on Discord.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess you kind of hinted about talking about this Vault wallet that you've also been working on. This is super exciting. I cannot wait to announce it when it comes out. But do you want to reveal some stuff about that Vault wallet? I
So the Vault is probably my favorite project at the moment.
yeah.
I'm literally so excited about the Vault. It's insane, and I hope I'm not overexcited, but it's literally for me it's the project. So we basically have this notion of a more secure wallet, and we're kind of I don't know how much time I'm still okay with time. So
We have
what we're
like
trying to do,
17
it's
minutes. Yeah,
okay.
go.
Yeah, we're doing
Plenty
good.
of
We're doing good. Boom.
time.
We can dive into it. So the main issue that I find using vanilla wallets, can we call ourselves vaulters? Maybe Vol L1 third, Volant. And the main issue I find with a lot of the apps, wallet apps out there, is that the flows are pretty much the same no matter what action you're actually performing. And this is literally a nightmare recipe right there because you click on the wrong button. Now all of your NFTs were stolen. You make the wrong, like click on the wrong action again, boom, all of your money was stolen.
Hmm.
So the stuff we're trying to do here is actually differentiating actions. All right. So we have kind of like very easy where you kind of have this your actual funds, right? And you can think of whatever you have, maybe a very valuable NFT, and that NFT will only be transferred out of your account, like if and only if you click on the red button, right? And
Hmm.
that's kind of like the red alarm for everyone. Like if you're not trying to actually send out that NFT, as long as you do not ever click on that red button, you're good. And you can then sign literally whatever you want. People can even steal your wallet key. Right? Something crazy can happen. Your wallet key gets compromised. Even if that key gets compromised, your NFT will not be stolen. So then with this, I hope people don't get lazy and just do whatever they want, and then they get like having other money that they have ends up getting hacked if it's not on this vault. But the stuff on the vault should be bulletproof.
Hmm.
And there's a couple of ways to go about this, right? So the easiest way that you can imagine is you actually lock your assets onto a smart contract, and but they're locked in under that smart contract with a specific key that you have. And that key is triggered, it's actually zero knowledge proof that is triggered once you click on the red button. Then as long as you don't click on the red button, you're good, your funds are there, and you can just claim it back to your account no worries. So if you actually want to have it, you're not comfortable having it on the contract, you will just have it under this like non-custodial back to you. There's a couple of angles there. So you can either have it just natively on chain or with the contract. The contract turns out it's easier to build for our side, but I'm also very open for like input on your side, like whatever is your comfort line. Maybe we can explore more than one solution on that end. But I find it so powerful, this notion that you can finally be at peace. Kind of like
Hmm.
there's a like something happens and they go, and I don't think that answer that a lot of people give you where they go, oh no, but now they show you as a JSON what you're signing. And or even worse, where they go, oh, but there's AI. there's AI methods now to detect if what you're signing is like a phishing attack or not. But then when you actually talk with those AI guys, they're like, yeah, it's not like we're really bulletproof, and the hackers are always evolving, and there's sometimes we have like some misses and we don't really detect things, which I find also messed up that we're now kind of like the solution for this problem is that we now give someone else what we're trying to do. Like we actually tell someone else like the action that we're trying to perform. Versus here, it's much more self-contained, it's much more sovereign, it belongs to the user, and the goal here is literally, even if you don't actually know much about blockchain and crypto, you should know enough that as long as you don't click on the red button, your money will not get transferred away from your wallet.
Yeah, that's
And
super
that's much more
interesting
comfortable, right?
because
I think that's
yeah,
super interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it's like with mass adoption, it's like, if your solution, cryptographically speaking, is like, oh, just put it on the user, like it's your responsibility. It's kind of like, no, like that's not great. Like to just be like, oh no, it's on you. You have to run it through all of these different things to make sure that you're not getting scammed. Like that's not a great
And
way
it's
to
so
enable
hard,
people to
100%. And
adopt
it's so
something.
hard. Sometimes you're trying to perform one action, whatever it may be. Maybe you're trying to perform something on a specific contract. But then
Yeah.
how do you actually know that? And you see this almost on a daily basis on Twitter. Like the moment you click that sign, then how do you actually know that your funds are not going to be drained immediately there? There's a
Yeah.
couple of things you can do, and this is it, but it's so hard, even for like veterans in the space. You see this constantly. They go like, "Oh, I lost all my assets today because something happened," and
Hmm.
usually it's literally they clicked somewhere where they shouldn't have, and it's like messed up. And with this, with the vault, and I hope now you can share my excitement with the vault, the fact that you can actually segregate those actions and potentially even have it where if they steal your key, they cannot steal your money, which I find that pretty powerful too, then uh, we'll be making people's lives easier.
Hmm. Yeah, safer and easier.
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
grail of everything. Yeah, that's really really exciting. Um, Amazing. And then also, I mean, in general, like we talked about voting and governance, I guess one more thing that I just wanted to keep up. So, Mario, you're going to be at Token 2049 this year, right? As well. Just wanted to give a little plug that if anyone's going to be there later this month, to definitely go find Mario and talk
Yeah,
to
shoot
him
me a
about
message.
any of this
Shoot me a
stuff.
message on
Yeah.
Discord. I'm happy to hang out if you're in Singapore. In
Yeah, I've been posting a little bit, but Lamina1's been on a little bit of an Asia tour over the last few months. We had our team in they're at Korea Blockchain Week now. They're going to be headed to Token 2049, and we were in Tokyo as well. There's a lot of really really exciting stuff happening in Asia right now around like the metaverse and blockchain and stuff like that. So a bunch of our team has been kind of meeting folks there, doing a bunch of projects around that. So yeah, Mario's going to be in Singapore. If anyone's going to be there, definitely drop us a line or drop him a line directly. We'd love to meet up and talk shop, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think that's about it. For the last 10 minutes, I'm gonna do a secret code drop, obviously, for all of you guys asking, and also just kind of show you guys how to claim it. Once again, the Lamina1 bot is a little tricky, so wanted to make sure that you guys all have it on lock. So I'm gonna share the secret code in the chat right now. It's crypto update 6096. The O is a zero. Make sure you copy and paste it. But let me just share my screen real quick and I can kind of show you guys how to access that real quick. Just because again, it's a little funny. We're actually doing a really big revamp of the Lamina1 bot right now where it's gonna have more discrete directions and kind of a better design. Oh no, why is my screen share working? Hold on just a sec, guys. Um,
if the answer is you have to update Discord, I'll die. I'll die.
oh my god, I'm gonna cry. I literally, oh my god, it's not letting me share my screen. This happened to me last time. let's see here. Oh, it should do this. Let's see. Nope. All right. Well, what you're gonna do, I'm gonna just explain it to you guys, and then I'll post a sort of tutorial in the AMA recap. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna want to go to the LAMINA1 bot, which you can access. I'll drop the link here if you're not currently a member of the LAMINA1 bot. But you're going to go to that link here. Oh, thank you so much, Jacko Girl. In the chat, you're going to type the /code and then hit enter. The bot will then send you a message back that says, please input your code. You're going to copy and paste the code that I just put in, so crypto update 9.6. And then it should shoot you a message that says, congratulations, mission code redemption successful. As long as you copy and paste it correctly. That XP will be, we're going to basically keep up this video over the weekend, and then we're going to drop that XP into everyone's account on Monday at 11:59 p.m. UTC. So basically the end of the day on Monday. Anyone who either was live here or catches up over the weekend will get 800 XP for listening into this episode. So yeah, should be fairly simple. Thanks so much, Jacko Girl, for typing in the and yeah, if anyone has any issues typing in the code, let me know. I tested it this morning. It should work for everyone. All right, perfect. We're getting some good green check marks for that, so that's a good sign. Um, Awesome. Yeah, so I mentioned the LAMINA1 bot is definitely getting a major design and UX update too soon, thanks to your feedback. Just as a reminder, it was kind of a soft launch. We're aware there were a number of bugs earlier this week. So those are getting fixed. And I also have a nice update that the airdrop ADB redemption drop. So we owe folks a couple of platform rewards from the last drop due to a faulty data pull. It's currently on track per L1 Engineering to launch early next week. We're super sorry about the delays on it. We've had a lot of team members traveling, and for full transparency, Will was running into some weird indexer issues that was blocking it. It should be super easy to deploy, but I think we're going to be good for next week. So we'll do that. And speaking of next week, we're gonna get Will on and the team on next week, I think next Friday for an update and kickoff on our next and final round of staking playtesting, which is gonna happen across the entire LAMINA1 community. This September, we're currently targeting soft target September 16th for those listening in. Not putting that down in writing for now, but we're targeting that to happen and obviously that means for anyone kind of like reading between the lines, that final round of staking playtesting, we're hoping to wrap right before, token listing and a bunch of other really exciting stuff that you guys have been asking about. So that's kind of the final piece that we need to put in place before we go live. So super exciting on that. And then finally, for everyone who claimed L1 early access passes last week, super excited. We had about 12,000 community members claim that passes. We're actually recording our token gated AMA with Neil next week. I've pulled a bunch of questions basically that you guys have dropped over the past 2 years of development on the server. It was really fun kind of going back into the log and seeing all the questions that you'd asked him. But if anyone has any questions for Neil about the metaverse, like his involvement in the project, thoughts on recent trends are happening in this space, like feel free to drop them in AMA questions. Again, that's going to be a token gated AMA on the LAMINA1 hub just for pass holders. We're kind of using this as a way to kind of start rolling out and testing token gating experiences on the hub, which is really exciting and a big kind of milestone that we're going to hit on the back end. And yeah, as I said, more soon on token listing, LL1 unlocks, marketplace functionalities and bringing like actual storefronts to the hub rather than having you guys auction stuff off in Discord is really, really on top of line right now. And of course, the next Hub Mania drop. So I know lots of questions around that. I'm sorry that I keep saying soon, but it is soon. And yeah, I will see you all next week. Congrats. Thank you all so much. Mario, thank you so much for coming on. This was a super fun session.
Thank you so much, everyone.
I love the like deep nerd stuff to keep us grounded amidst all the rewards and hype and everything else. These sessions are super fun. All right. Thank you guys. Take care. See you next week.